Philip Workman was a death row inmate set to be executed by lethal injection in 2007. As is customary, he was granted a request for his last meal before being sent to his death. Instead of asking for a pizza, or ice cream, or a steak dinner, he asked only that his meal be given to a homeless shelter rather than himself, a sort of final act of selflessness. But if you think that's unusual, wait till you hear why this guy was sentenced to death, because his crime also involved food. Philip Workman was born in 1953 at an army base in Kentucky, USA. Growing up in various army bases and suffering abuse, Workman's parents ensured his childhood was the stable foundation on which he could build a life as a successful drug addict. By 1981, he was 28 years old with a wife, an 8-year-old daughter, a cocaine addiction, and criminal convictions. What a combination. Struggling to make ends meet, the end of his nose and the end of a line of coke, Workman decided to rob a Wendy's fast food restaurant. Equipped with a .45 caliber revolver, Workman proceeded to rob the Wendy's, but fell afoul of the workers' trickery. An employee told Workman she had a cramp in her leg and asked if it was okay to stand up. Workman allowed this, and she took the opportunity to trigger the silent alarm. You couldn't make this shit up. Police officers Oliver, Stoddard, and Parker arrived at the scene. Workman fled into the parking lot and shots were fired. Ultimately, Lieutenant Oliver was killed, Stoddard was shot in the arm, and Workman was arrested. At the 1982 trial, Stoddard and Parker alleged Workman fired about 5 shots from his revolver as he fled. The officers maintained they did not fire their weapons at all, and while they didn't see Workman kill Oliver, there was a witness on the scene. Harold Davis claimed he had just parked his car in the Wendy's parking lot and was about 10 feet away when he witnessed Workman aiming his gun at Lieutenant Oliver before shooting and killing him. The jury found Philip Workman guilty of murder during the commission of a felony and recommended a sentence of death. Workman admitted to the armed robbery and shooting police officer Stoddard in the arm, but denied the murder of Lieutenant Oliver, though he later claimed his attorneys warned him not to emphasize this denial if he wanted any chance of avoiding the death penalty. Regardless, Philip Workman was now going to die. It turned out, however, there were some holes in the prosecution's case, rather large ones in fact. No ballistic or forensic analysis was performed, and the case hinged largely on the testimony of Harold Davis, who had not been thoroughly investigated. It turned out Davis was not mentioned in the police's initial canvassing of the crime scene, nor did his car appear in the photos. Nobody else at the scene had seen Davis. Harold Davis was an odd character, and not because he was a phantom who somehow eluded detection. A former girlfriend claimed he was with her on the night of the murder, and they witnessed no such thing. It turned out Davis had a history of scanning news reports for crimes, then coming forward to say he was a witness, telling the police what he thought they wanted to hear, and collecting the reward money to support his drug habit. The man was a professional witnesser. In 1999, he admitted this himself, saying he was not at the scene at all. He claimed that during the trial, he began to have second thoughts about condemning another man to death under false pretenses, but a man showed up to his house to let him know his family was under threat if he backed out. As bizarre of a twist as that is, I mean really, a professional witnesser, what a pathetic and repulsive existence. There's even more to the story. Workman's version of events had him running into the parking lot, but he tripped on the ground and decided to surrender. He heard shots being fired at him, and one of the officers whacked him over the head, which led him to fire 2 shots in a daze. One into the air and the other at the person who had fired on him. This was the bullet that struck Officer Stoddard. But the officers testified Workman fired the first and only shots. Well, get this, there was a witness who couldn't testify at trial due to illness. He claimed he didn't see Harold Davis, he didn't see Lieutenant Oliver get killed, but he did see Officer Parker fire his shotgun. And sure enough, hospital records show Workman had to have shotgun pellets removed from his arse. So, if Workman's version of events is closer to the truth than the officers, then who shot Lieutenant Oliver? This is some real grassy knoll type stuff here. Ballistic experts examined photos of Lieutenant Oliver's body. There was an entry wound in his back and a smaller exit wound in his chest. However, Workman had a .45 caliber hollow point ammunition, inconsistent with the wounds. Hollow point bullets expand on impact, causing a more devastating injury in the victim. According to the experts, it's rare these bullets pass through their target, and given Workman's choice of firearm and ammo, if such a thing were to occur, one would expect the exit wound to be larger than the entry. The experts claimed Lieutenant Oliver's wounds were more consistent with a .38 round, the same round used by the police. Had the other officers inadvertently killed Lieutenant Oliver in the crossfire, and then covered it up and pinned the blame on Workman? In light of all this new evidence, 5 of the 8 jurors signed affidavits renouncing either the sentence or the verdict or both. They, as well as the original prosecuting attorney and Lieutenant Oliver's daughter, all called for clemency for Workman. On March 30th, 2001, Philip Workman was to be put to death. However, just 37 minutes before his execution, a Supreme Court order overturned the judge's decision, and he was granted an appeal. 37 minutes is cutting it a bit fine, lads, don't you think? If that was me and my luck, the executioner would have had a speedy day, and I'd be executed 40 minutes ahead of schedule. The original judge presided over the appellate proceedings. Harold Davis once again provided key testimony, but when the prosecutor asked if he was changing his story, and therefore admitting he lied in court in the 1982 trial, Davis lost his nerve and simply stated he didn't lie and instead just hadn't remembered the events as clearly as he thought and didn't know what happened. This fucking guy. With Davis not willing to fully commit to recanting his original testimony, the judge was unconvinced by the other evidence and claimed a new trial was unwarranted. Philip Workman wasn't leaving death row. After 5 stays of execution and numerous attempts to have the matter reopened, Philip Workman was scheduled for execution on May 9, 2007. He was offered a last meal request. He said, "All I wanted was some Wendy's, that's all I want." No, I'm joking. He asked that a large vegetarian pizza be his last meal, but instead of it going to him, it be given to a homeless shelter to feed those in need. The Department of Corrections officials, hardened and calloused by their years dealing with the prison system, where animals are made of men and rape and murder are a currency alongside basic foodstuffs from commissary, were filled with a warm, swelling emotion in the face of this compassionate gesture. That emotion was contempt. The request was denied and Workman had nothing. Philip Workman was then executed at the age of 53. When asked for his last words, he said, "All I wanted was a Wendy's. Just one Wendy's. And they wouldn't give it to me." No, he said, "I've prayed to the Lord Jesus Christ not to lay charge of my death to any man." As a Seventh-day Adventist who was strongly opposed to desecration of the body after death, Workman had obtained a court order against autopsy prior to his execution. This was legally challenged and they did it anyway. Hundreds of people who had serious concerns over the validity of Workman's trial held a candlelit vigil. What's more, upon learning of his final request and its denial, thousands of dollars worth of pizzas were sent by business owners and ordinary citizens to homeless shelters across the state. So although he never got to know it, Philip Workman's final request was granted many times over. Whether you believe he was guilty of murder or not, that's a fairly bittersweet ending. For all the bad that happened, some good came of it in the end. Personally, I wouldn't be giving no homeless bums my meal, even if I was going to die right after, but then again, I'm not a particularly charitable person. Speaking of charity, please subscribe and follow me on Twitter and give me large sums of your money. Thank you.